right, everybody. This week I have not one, but two guests for you. We're going to take a trip back to the psychedelic 60s and 70s with Stewart Kenneth Moore and Brandon Beckner. Welcome to the show, guys.
Hello.
Hey, how you doing? Thanks for being here.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, today's all about conspiracy theories. No, I'm just kidding. What? One of them in particular. We're really glad you guys could be here on Easter Sunday with us. Sorry about that, but we got you here somehow. With all our first
belly full of ham, but other than that, I'm feeling good.
Yeah, I got some leftovers in my fridge right now.
I don't ascend until the third day, so I'm still here in my tomb.
Yeah, nice. There you go. You rise because you've been drinking all day.
Yeah.
You know, come out of it.
See, this is the internet. Right? You're exaggerating.
Yeah,
I've had a couple of drinks this afternoon.
That's funny. I'm just thinking of what does that mean for you, right? Because you said you didn't celebrate, so it's like, yeah, you come out after the weekend, it's like daylight.
That's true, yeah.
Like, I've been locked in a pub all weekend. What the hell? Just a quick origin story, guys. It's your first time, both of you, on the show. Being involved with comics and stuff. Give us the quick rundown for each of you, like how you got involved in comics and where it started for you. So I guess Stewart, maybe you first.
Okay, when I was a little boy, my dad had a job. I lived in LA when I was really little, and grew up in Scotland, but I was born in LA. And my dad worked at LAX, and they got a box in, and it had no label. The label had been ripped off, and the box was damaged. And they waited, this box sat in the depot for months waiting for somebody to come pick it up. Nobody picked it up. So eventually I was there in the summer, and my dad said, look, there's a little book you can have that's in this box. Nobody's claimed it. And it was a tiny little kind of A5 size reprint of the original Batman comics. And I just loved it. It was the original Batman, like way back, the first Batman stuff. So I loved all that. And I guess that lit the touch paper. And over the years, I had various interactions with comics and got kind of into them here and there. But it wasn't until really I read Judge Dredd. I got sick one time, and my mum brought me back 2000 AD and Judge Dredd, and that was it. And that was the day Star Wars died for me. I just was no longer interested in Star Wars. And so that's what happened. And I had a lifelong fanaticism for comics since I was about 12 or 13, yeah.
That's awesome. And you've been involved with 2000 AD as well, right?
Drawing Judge Dredd, which is like a kind of dream come true, kind of bucket list thing, so really cool.
That's pretty awesome. Yeah. And what about you, Brent?
This might come as a surprise, but I'm not even really a comic book fan at all.
That's great. That's awesome.
As far as for me, it was, I think, the Bazooka Joe gum.
Oh yeah,
would get those little comics. I would read them, while I'm chewing that first big mouthful.
Yeah.
And then I had a picture comic book Bible when I was, probably 10, which, kind of made it a somewhat interesting read. But I've never really been into comic books. This is my first foray, starting with, Stewart introducing the idea of taking our screenplay. I just come from a background of making movies and music and worked in the entertainment industry for 30 years. And Stewart had the idea of turning this screenplay that we had into a graphic novel. And I thought, that sounds awesome, because it's almost like we're getting like full on story board treatment for our script, because we were having trouble getting people to bite, we're getting meetings. People love the script. And of course, speaking of conspiracy theory, we were convinced, there has to be these guys, there's someone getting to these guys, and they're just, nobody has the balls to do this script because they're afraid of getting, being found at the bottom of a lake in a crate, So,
awesome.
Because it was weird. We were people loved it, and we actually got agents, out of the script, and took meetings around Hollywood for quite a while, this went on for years. And every time we'd run into Stewart in Prague over beers, he'd ask how our projects were going. Hey, how's the MK Ultra? And finally, and I don't remember. Do you remember what led you to want to do a graphic novel version of the script?
Yeah, well, we were in Letna, and asked you what you were up to, and you mentioned a few scripts, and then one of them, I guess it was Scott, actually said, "Have you heard of MK Ultra?" And I had. And I remember you both said something like, wow, because a lot of people we speak to haven't heard of it. But I was kind of vague about it, but I definitely read about it. But I certainly hadn't, gone anywhere near what you had gone into. You'd gone into deeply into research and turned up all this stuff that I'd never heard of.
And this is probably around what, 2003, maybe?
Yeah.
Oh wow, so it's been around for a while.
Yeah,
this goes back quite a while. I mean, it's
Yeah, I mean, I think Brandon and Scott were working on the script maybe 4 or 5 years even before that, and but it was just you, I think, talking at the table about the scenes, and I thought, wow, those are scenes that you would. I mean, I'm a fanatic about the comics medium, so I was like, that's better as a comic. That would be arguably better done, than it could be done as a film, or a TV show. I mean, they can do these things great, but there's something magical about a comic, and also it dials into the underground comic scene really easily because it's set in San Francisco. It's got, that's where all this stuff, like, the most famous examples being like R. Crumb and whatnot, kind of springing up. The fabulous Furry Freak Brothers. I've been a nut about those guys forever, and I mean, just off like reading Judge Dredd right at the beginning, my parents got me a great book on comics, and inside there was all this stuff about Crumb and the Freak Brothers and all these guys, and the San Francisco Comics Company, which was this, I think that's the name of it, which was this this store where all these guys congregated. And I was speaking to someone today, a guy from Mission Comics, and he told me that there's so much acid going around in there that the guy that ran the store thought he was Jesus for a wee while and actually started dressing like Jesus and turning up. Crazy stuff.
Sure, that was probably pretty common.
Yeah. But something about that and the color, just the amazing. I think you described the opening scene with all the sort of, him going down a river and mushrooms springing up. And stuff.
I
remember you talking about that.
Yeah, because Hoffman's first trip, in 1943, I think it was, and they call it Bicycle Day or whatever, and I guess he, ingested. There was more to the story than I originally thought. He actually, dosed himself by, picking up a little piece of glass. He dropped a flask or whatever, and it had his latest batch, which was LSD 25, was the 25th version of this ergo compound. Trying to find like a perfect sort of, or like a respiratory stimulant or some kind of thing. And then so he got a little on his finger, and then tripped, but then he got on his bike and started to ride home, and then I'm sure all hell broke loose and instant sort of Disney cartoon. So I think we probably were explaining how we wanted to do. We wanted to start the movie in 1943 and have it be black and white. And then when he's riding his bike and suddenly he starts going on this world's first LSD trip, it's like turns into like, one of those like bed knobs and broomsticks where suddenly like there's like animated characters floating by and then, gets all crazy. Yeah. And that, I'm sure that probably inspired Stewart because I mean, up to that point, we were huge fans of his paintings, and I still have several of them, in my closet, and I pull them out every once in a while and show them to friends. And like the one where you got there was Bob Geldof in there, and the one got the horse range and just like super psychedelic, surreal stuff. So I mean, it's been a while, but I'm sure that's how the conversation must have gone, and it just seemed like a no-brainer, to team up with Stewart.
And then I carried that through to making the black and white opening like an old EC comic, becoming a kind of more modern kind of underground, colorful comic. And the transition panels, it's kind of subtle, I guess, but the transition panels have Hoffman saying, because he's talking to the gardener who's like not trimmed the trees, and one of the trees has broken the glass in the window, and this has kind of kicked this thing off. And as he's leaving the gardener, he says, "Keep on strimming." But as he's saying, "Keep on strimming," he's transitioning into this acid sort of environment. And that was my kind of like little nod to Keep on Trucking. And
right.
And I repeat it again in the second volume. I put a little bit about that in there in the second volume. Keep on Running, and just like to put these little sort of Easter egg things in where I can.
I think another attraction for Scott and I was that my mom's down the hall and she's a full-on grammar Nazi. So I'm even when she's out of earshot, I've still found myself like Scott and me.
I do that all the time too.
So it was like,
bring her into the screen and we'll just start shouting bad grammar at her.
Where her worst one is where where are you at? Like, you're not supposed to end a sentence in a preposition,
Right.
But anyway, so we'd written several screenplays by that point, probably 5 or 6, and we've been doing it for several years. And it was just, a lot of them, when nothing happens with them, they just end up on a shelf. I mean, our third screenplay, we ended up finally making it ourselves. It's called Remarkable Power. Finally getting the rights back to it after 10, 12 years. And I think we just wanted to have at least some kind of like a finished version of MK Ultra, even if the film or TV show or whatever never materialized. We'd have some form that we could, someone could it's there and that's it. It's cool thing about a book is that it doesn't need to go anywhere else. Like, it's finished.
Right. Yeah. It's finished. So. And I guess, Stewart, your art, it breaks the normal panel sequence a lot with this, right?
It does.
Yeah, and it almost has to, right, with the subject matter. So
yeah,
how did you pick and choose how to do that? Did you just kind of you started to do it and you're like, okay, this kind of makes sense? Or
yeah, I had a couple of different things going through my mind. The first was that I knew that the LSD Experience Scenes would be a nice break for me because all the sort of rigid comic storytelling 9-panel stuff would be tiresome and difficult and complicated, and then I'd be able to kind of let loose when I get into the LSD stuff. The other thing was I tried to set the 70s style as a kind of similar to underground comics, and I tried to do the 50s stuff a little bit more like 50s comics that you would see. So I deliberately put a little bit of awkward characterization in, and then in a few places where I actually did awkward characterization in the 50s, I just left it because that fit this I didn't refine it. So if you look at these old comics and the EC and stuff, you'll see there's a lot of kind of awkward drawing, and because these guys were working really fast, they were like just kicking a page out as fast as possible, and so they weren't really refining things. And it's no criticism of them. They got to make money, and it was arguably me doing that, trying to aim at that kind of style is a little bit like false or something. But I tried to keep those two almost like an extension of the thing of black and white leading to color, black and white being EC, and then leading to color being like in the 70s style. I think I kind of got it. There's something kind of Archie a little bit about the 70s scenes.
Yeah, for sure.
Archie, but dirty and more, drugged out and
drugged out Archie.
Yeah.
And I guess so. Brandon, you had the script written for a while. Like, what was it? Just the story of MK Ultra, like the conspiracy theory. Was that what kind of drew you into to write about that, or?
Well, I think what drew me in was, Scott and I were always on the lookout for, whatever our next screenplay was going to be, and we were just coming off of our last script, and we're sort of fishing around for ideas. And I heard just caught the end of a radio interview with Jerry Garcia that had been done years ago. So this is probably about 2003 when I heard this. And it was just like the end of the interview, and he was asked about his first LSD experience, and he said that it was courtesy of the CIA, basically. He was given it by some CIA agent. He mentioned the program MK Ultra, and I thought, okay, that's wild. Like, what?
Yeah.
And so I went home, and this is kind of early Google days. Wasn't come up with a whole bunch. Had a lot of like sort of cross-referencing, and you'd see something, and then you'd kind of type that name in, and then something, and before long there was quite a bit of info we were coming across, but there's a lot of stuff that hadn't been declassified yet. It was still pretty secretive. Most people didn't really know. Stewart was probably one of the few that had heard about it back then. There was a couple books out, Acid Dreams, and then one called In Search of the Manchurian Candidate that we reread. And just pretty quickly, like just what we were reading, the fact that it had never been turned into a film blew us away.
Yeah, and the thing is that most people think it's a conspiracy theory, but it was unearthed. Here's what basically happened. As far as I understand it, Watergate broke, and then the first thing to be shredded at the CIA was MK Ultra. They completely shredded it because they didn't want anybody to know about it. A few years after Watergate, the
like
Church
90%
Committee
of the papers supposedly Richard Helms was able to get destroyed.
They were under the impression they had eliminated it. They thought they had eliminated it. And then about 4 or 5 years later, the Church Committee looked into CIA assassinations, because the thing is, the CIA had been accused of several attempts at assassination of Fidel Castro and various other people, and the Church Committee were very concerned about this behavior. So they started to look into the CIA, and they said, hand over everything that you've been working on. And so they handed over 100% of what they've been working on. And their own researchers, the Church Committee's researchers, found a second set of receipts filed at a different place that corresponded to an activity that wasn't in the 100% of activity that the CIA had been doing. So they said, what's this thing on these receipts? What's MK Ultra? What have you been spending $25,000? Or it was a lot of money. It's actually much more than that.
Why is there a receipt for $1,000 worth of red velvet curtains?
Yeah, that's right, for MK Ultra
and Toulouse-Lautrec paintings.
That's right.
All sorts of like S&M equipment,
gear,
really,
sex gear and stuff, and all of this stuff started emerging on receipts, but there was no record of the actual activity. So in 1977, they had hearings in the Senate, and it was led by Ted Kennedy, and they had CIA right in front of them, and they did unearth more documents, but we only know a fraction of what really happened. But what we know happened is insane. And that's what drives me crazy about it. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's craziest one.
It's true. Yeah.
I think it's the craziest one. They had a glass skull in the CIA, and they were firing sonic blasts at it back in the 50s. They had a gun that fired sonic. It's in the papers at the hearings. That would fire some kind of sonic blast because they wanted to know how they could knock a person unconscious without touching them. So they had a skull made, and then they filled it with smoke. And they would stand back and shoot this sonic blaster, and they would watch the smoke move inside the skull to tell whether that person could be knocked unconscious.
What the hell? That's insane.
That's just one example. Another thing that's in the papers that's really quite terrifying is when they were queried on the sub-project to do with a Manchurian candidate, which is someone who can be switched on and off as an assassin.
Yeah.
They said it was a complete failure, except for 2 candidates, 2 females. Both of which, now we don't have their names. We don't have any record of their names, but there are 2 women out there who could be called up on the phone and a word would be said down the phone and their personalities would switch to a kill directive and switch back on a call. Now, this was hypnosis projects that they were doing, and they were doing them up in Montreal. And the guy who was one of the worst people in MK Ultra was a Scottish psychotherapist up in Montreal. And he was doing this thing where he was putting people under for 3 months at a time and just playing the same tape. Your mother hates you. Your father hates you. Constantly, 10,000, 20,000 times. And then rebuilding their personality. And the idea was that he could put a new personality. He could lay a new personality in on top of an old personality. One that they could switch around. This was the attempt, as far as we know.
Crazy.
And there were 2 women that could be turned on and off, given a kill directive, and we don't know who they were. And the end result is the scientists said, "Oh no, it never worked. It was a failure." Well, it obviously wasn't a failure because 2 of them were.
There's 2 of them out there.
Yeah, there's 2 of them that were effective, and it's very creepy. And
one of them was
the
named
stuff
Hillary
that Brandon
Clinton.
and Scott featured mostly was Operation Midnight Climax. I'll let Brandon talk about that.
That was the thing that when we came across that info, then we knew that we had a movie. Yeah, so when we came across this one part, it was already crazy enough that they're experimenting with LSD and like dosing, people and interrogating people on LSD. But when we found out that they built brothels in things got so out of control in DC when they were first testing it out and dosing each other and kind of having fun. It was fun and games and all that. And then department staff. 1 minute, janitor's just, mopping the floor. Next minute he's tripping, completely frying his head off.
Yeah.
And they ended up spiking the punch at a Christmas party, and everybody just wigged out so bad that they thought the Russians had, poisoned the water supply of DC, and the president got called, and so they had to move. They had to get out of DC. It was getting too crazy. So they moved to San Francisco because they had mafia connections there, and they knew narcs and police and greasy, shady people that could, get away with anything if these guys are involved. And George White, this guy named George White, was one of them. And so he kind of became the head of this Operation Midnight Climax, where they built these, or kind of refurbished a couple buildings they bought and turned them into brothels, and that's where the red leather curtain, the red velvet curtains came in, and all these Toulouse-Lautrec paintings, and and then they had these two-way mirrors set up, so there'd be this one big extravagant room with a big bed and probably a pole and whatever you have in there.
Right. Yeah.
And these prostitutes were they bring these prostitutes in that George White had all sorts of connections to the prostitution ring, and would bring them in, and they would train them. They had this famous magician named John Mulholland who taught the prostitutes how to use sleight of hand and slip drinks in, and there's stuff in drinks and have little things on their blouse and squirt it, and the guys. So they'd go to bars, and these prostitutes would lure these guys back to the brothels, whereby then they would get dosed, and then meanwhile behind them two-way mirrors are sitting all these MK Ultra agents sipping martinis, smoking cigars, and just watching every stone and kinky moment, And then I'm like, okay, this is awesome,
This, yeah. This is how do you not write about
as it gets? Yeah. So
yeah,
it's so
that's
funny.
For us. We had to basically feature that, and so we just kept digging and doing more research, and we didn't want to make it 100% based in truth, like a biopic or something.
Right.
But there was this sort of somewhat infamous incident that involved there was a military scientist named Frank Olson, and he one of the first sort of acid tests that they did. They gathered a group of people out in some remote house, and they're just all sitting down, and they get served a whiskey or whatever, and next thing you know, they told that there's this drug in there, and things got crazy from there. The night, I'm sure, was a fairly memorable night for all these guys. But Frank Olson was one of them, and unfortunately, it really affected him negatively. I mean, bad trip, probably be a euphemism, but he went downhill fast, and got really depressed, and wanted to quit the job, and was threatening to blow the whistle, basically. And next thing you know, the CIA scoop him up and bring him up to New York, and have him in this, it was a 30th floor, pretty high up, being monitored by another agent in preparation for the next day. They were going to supposedly take him to get analyzed by a psychologist or something, but he ends up jumping out of the window and falling to his death. And it just reeked of foul play from the get-go, and the family knew something was up. He was not a suicidal guy. He loved life. Something happened. Took a long time. His son Eric Olson spent years trying to get to the bottom of it, and finally got at least to a point where President Ford brought the whole family into the Oval Office and offered a formal apology. Not saying they killed him. I mean, obviously, it was clearly a whack job. I mean, they whacked him, but they apologized. They admitted that they had dosed him, and that's about as probably as good as it was going to get for them in terms of any kind of closure.
Wow.
But so we thought, why don't we take that sort of the bones of that, and then just kind of fictionalize some characters, and then bring the whole project the Midnight Climax, and just kind of build our own sort of framework around the real stuff, So the main two characters, Chase, who is an ex-CIA agent who was involved in the program, loosely based on a number of guys that could have been involved in the program, none of which I don't know if anybody knows. Do you know,
No.
Stu? I don't think anyone's ever been identified as being those
No.
original MK boys, we call them.
No.
And then the young reporter Seymour, he was originally based a little bit on combination of Seymour Hersh, who was the guy that was responsible for the Freedom of Information Act, and he's outed a whole bunch of stuff over the years. And then like the son of this Frank Olson guy. I mean, in the original story, it turns out that the character who gets whacked in our story because he was going to out the program ended up being Seymour's father, but we ended up getting rid of that thing. But so it's kind of and weirdly, and we were already a couple years and we had a script. We were getting sent around the whole thing. This is before Stewart got involved. I got an email from a friend who loved the script, and she was also a writer, and the subject just said no. I was like, oh, this is bad. And it's an article. So a year earlier, just to Tarantino, and go back before I give you the goods on that. We had been introduced by our agents to a producer named Craig Baumgarten, who was one of the producers on Spider-Man and worked really closely with Tobey Maguire, had a relationship with him, and was looking for some vehicles for Tobey. Loved the script, saw it as something that Tobey could do. He could play Seymour. And of course, this is 15 years ago. And really, I think they really liked the kind of the son, the Eric Olson thing or whatever. We did about a year's worth of work rewriting the script for Craig and Tobey, only to then just kind of which is typical, to kind of get ghosted. A year later, there it is, right in Variety. Tobey Maguire's MK Ultra project, based on the Eric Olson, Frank Olson story, blah blah blah. Called like Project Bluebird or whatever it was. So we're like, oh, there it is. They just kind of ripped us off, did their own thing, swept us under the rug, and I guess we'll get to go watch the movie at some point, and receive nothing in return. But also, like it happens quite a bit in Hollywood, nothing came of it.
Right.
So here we are, still 15 years later, and nobody's made the the definitive MK Ultra movie. So we're hoping to be the first ones to it. Still, this much. That's 15 years later.
The closest is American Ultra, and it's not really the story of MK Ultra. It's kind of a fictionalized exaggeration of.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
What it does is it filters down into science fiction, and it's like I'm watching Stranger Things with my wife. I just turned it on and I said, "That's MK Ultra."
It's popping up. There's been stuff like, I mean, even Men Who Stare at Goats. While it wasn't about MK Ultra, it was more about they were trying to use ESP or whatever. The tone of it, and I was told by more than one person. I mean, incredible people. That there's no way that they hadn't gotten their hands on our script. Like they had to at least seen our script because there's too many similarities. And and then Wormwood, which came out just like 3 years ago on Netflix, which is sort of like a half Errol Morris, half docu, half dramatic, and that was all about the Frank and Olson story. It was cool. I liked it. In fact, I used some clips of it, and I did a little. We call it a Rip-O-Matic. I'm also a trailer editor. I did that for 15 years. And a lot of shows or movies will want to kind of put together a little promo, but they haven't shot anything yet. So our job was to just find stuff from other shows. And so I did that even for MK Ultra, and just a couple months ago, and used a couple shots from Wormwood, and it was good, But again, nobody's done like the Hollywood version, which it still blows my mind.
I think you're onto something saying that there's someone behind the curtain, like like squashing it all. There's a higher power there. That's
like when are we going to meet that person? Because we've been at this before. We've been at this for 15 years. These guys know what they're doing. If they want to find someone, they're going to find them.
Right.
It's true.
Exactly.
So maybe. I don't know. Maybe one of us was in the program. I remember a little young. But
I hate to break it to you, Brandon, but the whole point of me doing this was because I'm actually working with the agency, and I wanted to catch and kill your script. So
there it is.
You're actually about 15 years older. You're just wearing a mask.
This is a wig.
I didn't realize we had an agent here the whole time.
I'm actually bald. I'm actually totally bald underneath, not just slightly bald.
And reading the comic, because thank you. You were nice enough to send us a copy of it to read. I
Thank
remember
you.
years ago listening to a podcast, the best source of correct information in this world about MK Ultra, and there was some connection with Charles Manson. And so in your research, did you find any of that? And if so, has that come up like in later volumes of this?
Okay, so Ted mentioned to me in an email that he'd seen this thing about a Manson connection, and I had always poo-pooed the Manson connection because I thought that was like just too much of a spread, and too much of a kind of a excuse.
Yeah,
for
it's too
hippies
easy.
turning bad. It's like, come on, there were bad people, there would have been bad hippies, and so on. So I didn't buy into that really. But Ted was the first to mention it to me, and then later on, I realized what he was talking about. He was talking about Tom O'Neill's book, Chaos, the Manson something. I forget the whole title of the book, but Tom O'Neill did an interesting interview with Joe Rogan in which he explained all this. And when I realized that was there, I thought, that might be what Ted's talking about. So I started listening to it. And sure enough, he's got a very convincing argument that Manson had some involvement in that thing. Now, MK Ultra wasn't like this successful thing. It was a pretty haphazard, pretty badly done operation, and they tested people, but they didn't necessarily debrief them or fix them. They just let them go.
Yeah.
And so, Whitey Bulger was a test subject.
Yeah.
Ted Kaczynski, who became the Unabomber, was a test subject. These are facts.
Well, of course, Ken Kesey and Garcia, and all these guys, Tim Leary.
Yeah.
Those guys all got their doses in like the university test, and then, like Stewart said, then this kind of, were set free, and they basically, got their hands on their own supply and turned on all their friends. And next thing you know, the CIA inadvertently creates the hippie peace and love movement, which is complete direct opposition to what they're trying to use it for, which is to create a mind control drug to win the Cold War.
Right.
It's wonderfully ironic that they proliferate not mind control but total mind expansion.
Right.
For the most part, I've never taken LSD. I've never done it or anything like that. But and I don't think I need to, because I think I've got something like that running about in my blood.
Yeah, I think people with your kind of brain, Stuart, like that would just flip the lid off. Perfect.
Yeah, we don't need that.
It would be too much.
You don't need, see, people take LSD so they could get to where you are.
So they could achieve that higher state of.
That's a wonderful compliment. I'll take that.
Well, there you go.
No, but that is, but no, and so. So you had the positive side, which are wonderfully creative things started happening in counterculture. But then you've got a few of these major negatives that we know about. So the Unabomber is one of them. And but we don't know about Manson. But Tom O'Neill turned up a bunch of weird stuff about what's his name, Bugliosi? The guy that ran the book Helter Skelter. He was a public defender in LA. Well, he's so Tom O'Neill's got all this stuff that's really interesting. And one of the things he said was that Jolyon West, who was a chemist who denied he worked for the CIA, but there's plenty of evidence that he did, had said to other colleagues that he was running a hippie laboratory in San Francisco. So he had a place that was a hippie crash pad, but it was actually a laboratory where people would come in with pens and ask these people questions and allow them to get access to drugs and then ask them questions. So this was part of this thing. And there was a clinic in the middle of San Francisco that was set up. It was like a free clinic for hippies and stuff right in the Haight-Ashbury area. And Manson, when he came west, he first went to San Francisco. So he was in San Francisco with all these, his family, what they call the family, these women that hung about him, and his little group. And they would go to this place and get STDs sorted out at the clinic and pregnancies aborted, or I don't know what they were doing, but they would go in and out of this clinic. And this clinic has a dubious reputation. And when the information, Brandon mentioned earlier that a lot of this stuff was secretive. Well, in recent years, some documents emerged that suggested that this particular clinic had connections to MK Ultra, And no sooner had those documents been unearthed than the clinic closed. It shut down. And I don't know if I might be wrong, but it may be due to Tom O'Neill's book, Chaos, coming out.
Wow.
So there's all sorts of weird stuff. And so Manson and them were going in and out of there. They were getting, tested and, so who knows what happened after that.
Wow.
Exactly.
So anyway, sorry to answer your question. So I put little nods. Once I knew that, I thought, well, I should put little nods to that in. So I put little nods in. I put a drawing Chase falls asleep at one point. So I took the opportunity to give him a dream sequence where he sees Sharon Tate as a gigantic sort of geometric space, of cubes and stuff. It's Sharon Tate, the victim of the Manson family. And I took a few other opportunities to point to Manson and them, but I didn't make any. I didn't call out any conclusions, and I didn't pull away from the story. I stayed with the story. But in the background with comics, you can put stuff in the background. You can put in a bit of chicken fat and suggest things and so forth. So that's what I was doing.
So there's a little bit of conspiracy stuff in there.
Yeah, there's a little nudge.
You got a cop to it.
Yeah.
And this is volume 1, right? So there's a plan. Can we talk about how many volumes you think?
That's it. It's just 2, and I submitted volume 2 like a week ago now, I think. So that should be out July 24th, I think it is. And
then they'll put the 2 together, and it will be. It should be one book. The strategy of dividing it in 2 is, I guess, it's interesting. Way to maybe squeeze a few bucks out of people, but it's one story. It's not like a. It was one story that we just ripped in half.
Okay.
And so I'm actually my money is in the full book. That's the thing, and so hopefully they'll have a good release timing for that.
See, Brandon, you're new to comics.
Comic-Con or these comic things, like you want the full thing.
Yeah, you're new to comics. You're supposed to release it over 2 years in single issues, 24 issues. Then you release the trades one at a time, volumes 1 through 4.
And then
you do the hardcover 2-1 edition. Then you do the slipcase all-in-one edition.
I can't wait to that.
With gold foiled letters on the front.
And so
and then eventually you do like the absolute edition. It's a little bigger. It makes Stewart's art pop a little better for if you want to spend like $120 on a book.
And he's got his black. So this is great because actually I have 3 comic book fanatics here that can answer my question, because I always felt a little bit greasy about dividing the book up into 2. It's kind of like, well, it's sort of a rip. You're making them pay for 1, and then they got to pay for this just to read the second half of the story, and then they got to pay for it all again for it. But then I realized maybe that's the way you guys like that stuff. Like you like the different editions and the So that's part of the fun of it, I guess. Okay, I get it.
And I would be super hyped if like the next Kickstarter or something, the volume 2 had a slipcase where you could put them both together. I would pay a little bit extra for that.
Yeah, I like the idea. That'd be
and I'm not the only one, so I'm just saying.
On the Indiegogo one, we had a paper dust cover. Yeah, it was Hank's idea. It was a great idea that we do a. Oh no, it wasn't Hank's idea. It was Robbie's idea that we do a blacklight. So I'd never done anything like blacklight before, so I was like, oh wow,
that's cool.
Super
great
cool.
idea
We got a super idea from Robbie. We got this blacklight special edition cover for volume 1, and then Hank came up with an idea which I won't tell you what it is because it's super cool. But I need to start that in about 3 weeks, and I'm going to do a special dust cover for volume 2, which isn't blacklight, but it's another optical effect. And so the 2 on the shelf or in your slipcase edition,
there you go.
They're going to look great. So, and then I've got another thing I'm doing. I'm working on a big poster. Again, I won't say anything about it right now because I don't like to talk about these things, because if I don't achieve them or somehow they don't work out, then I look sort of silly. But I've got something I'm really excited about, which is to do with LSD and in that era, and it was a thing that was in the news, and it's very American. It's a classically American story. So I'm looking forward to doing this as a promotional poster for volume 2. And I'll let you guys. I'll post it to you and everything once I get
Great.
close
Awesome.
to getting it done.
Look forward to that.
Yeah, so that's something.
Yeah.
See, you have the opposite strategy of me. I say it that
Oh.
way. I have to do it, or else I look like an asshole.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, I have to say, I've been down the asshole route so many times that that's not worth it. So
Can't do it anymore.
I go down the I'm not telling you route until voila, here it is.
Yeah.
So I can allude to things, but I don't really like to talk about them too much because you can also talk an idea away. Really, to be honest, you start to talk about an idea, and then all your energy and excitement goes out the window.
Right.
To some extent, so or can.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm looking forward to doing those two things that I can't tell you
Sounds
anything
cool.
about.
Sounds really cool.
But
So, Volume 1's out now.
Yeah.
You can get it on, I'm sure, Clover. Is it just Clover Press?
Yeah, Clover Press, but you can get it on Amazon. You can order it through Barnes and Noble or any bookstore. You can order it through any comic store. We suffered a bit from the distribution thing with COVID. I don't really understand what happened, but we had there was paper shortages, global paper shortages, and then there was the shipping debacle, and then Diamond Distributors got hit with a malware attack. And so there's all sorts of crazy stuff happened around the time that Volume 1 was coming out. But you can certainly order it and get it from Amazon. And I think that seems to be the quickest and best way. And if you want a special edition with the blacklight cover, then you go through Indiegogo or through Clover because it's basically the same thing.
Okay.
And then Volume 2 is going to be on Kickstarter this summer?
Yeah, it should be July 24th that it's available.
Okay.
So,
Great.
I mean, that should be available on Amazon without the special edition cover on July 24th. And but it'll be at some point around then. It will also be on Indiegogo or Kickstarter with the cover, the special dust jacket. Which to hell with it! It's a 3D cover. I'm doing 3D cover.
I knew it was going to be 3D.
3D. I'm going to do 3D glasses. This was Hank's idea. It was a great idea from Hank, so I'm going to do that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It's going to be mental. It's going to be absolutely mental. Now I've said it, I'm going to have to really make it mental because your expectations are now.
Well, now I got to order it. I got to get you just locked me in.
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually drawing it. I've got these 3D glasses that I draw with that I can look to figure it out.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, that's wild.
Yeah,
that's wild.
That's awesome.
It'll be fun because that was an era thing, if all those movies come up in the 50s, that's one of the great things about Hank's suggestion is that all those films came up in the 50s. Those great, crazy, actually they're pretty dull. If you ever watched those 3D movies, we had a series of them in Scotland in about 1985. They put them on the TV and all the kids went and got the 3D glasses and sit and watch the TV. But the movies were boring. They weren't very good movies.
They weren't very good.
You'd have cowboys and Indians jumping over fences at you and stuff.
Yeah.
My first 3D movie where you had to actually have the little 3D glasses, the red and blue ones. Was Night of the Living Dead 3D.
Look at
and it was a remake of Night of the Living Dead. It was a really bad remake of Night of the Living Dead. And
don't remake
but there would just be excuses for it was exactly the stereotypical 3D movie. Because it'd be a guy with a sword and be like,
he's like,
look at the 3D guy.
It's the shitness is too great.
And then 2 years later, Avatar came out, and we're like, "Oh, this is 3D."
Yeah, this is what it's supposed to be.
Yeah, but the best one I ever saw was the first best one was I was in Disneyland, and Michael Jackson did a 3D movie for Disneyland.
I remember that
with Industrial Light and Magic, and so we all had to sit with these big sort of glasses on, and it's pretty cool,
Yeah. I remember that.
Yeah, some animal comes floating out as some sort of gerbil with wings comes flying out. And he's right there, and I'm turning to my mate going, "Hey, did you see that gerbil right there?" He's like, "What, the one here?" And I'm like, "Hi." So yeah, that was Disneyland, 1986.
See, that's the appeal of LSD to some people is they don't need to go to Disneyland to see that shit.
Yeah, you just sit in the room in the dark.
You're already in Disneyland.
They just sit
Disneyland
downtown.
Comes to you.
Yeah, exactly.
Thinking what?
Whether you like it or not.
Yeah. Well, awesome, guys.
So yeah, guys. So it was a ton of fun talking to you. Before we say goodbye, where's the best place for people to follow both of you moving forward to either check up on MK Ultra or anything else you're doing in the near future?
Well, in my case, I'd say Twitter probably. At OPIPOP, at OPIPOP on Twitter. That's where I post most. I use Facebook, and we've got a Facebook page for MK Ultra. But Twitter, it's probably the easiest to find, and you can dial into all the stuff we're doing through that, I would think.
Yeah. And then I have a website, it's brandonbeckner.com. I haven't really done a whole lot with it yet, but hopefully in the future it'll come in handy. Facebook, I'm all over the place. Just at some point I'll figure. I get YouTube, and we do have a YouTube. We're trying to get more stuff up on just. It's one example. I'm trying to figure out how to you got all these different. You got Twitter, you got Instagram,
Right.
And then you have a project that comes along, and it's like, do I just tell people about it on my own thing, or do I create now I got a Facebook thing for that, I got an Instagram thing for that, I got a YouTube thing. It just gets jumbled. So I'm trying to work it all through. But
okay,
type my name into Google and you'll figure something out.
Yeah. Well, everybody, thanks for having us, guys. That was
thanks
cool.
for being here.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. So everybody out there listening, watching, whatever you're doing, I will have those links in the show notes below to both these gentlemen's website, as well as a link to the MK Ultra book on Cloverfield, I keep saying Cloverfield, Clover Press website. So make sure to go check the book out. I promise you it's phenomenal. I absolutely loved it. I think it was one of those books I read in one sitting, and that's kind of the best compliment I can give a comic.
Wow, that's great. Thank you so much.
So both of you, thanks so much for taking the time, and we'll have to do this again sometime.
I'd love to.
Great.
It'd be great.
Thanks,
all
guys.
the best, and happy Easter.
Happy Easter.
Happy Easter.